Feet to the Fire with the Black Knight of Talk Radio, James Atayanchik, is the technical production of IPS Media Works and aired on the Jancic Radio Network of stations. The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers, and not necessarily the views of the Jancic Radio Network, nor its advertisers and affiliates. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium. Continuing with no commercials, from IamTheWitness.com, Daryl Bradford Smith returns to Feet to Fire. Welcome back, Daryl.
Well, it's great to be back, James. You know, I've been on twice before. You always ask me very important questions, and ones that certainly need to be pondered. And the thing that we don't do enough of, we get a lot of pundits out there, and a lot of people trying to metatext all of the problems that are going on, but rarely do we get somebody that's willing to kind of dig through the minutia and get a real sense of what's happening, so that when you leave the interview, the people listening have a sense that they actually have learned something and are able to understand what's coming next a little better. If you go to the websites and just become a news junkie, that's really not affecting the capacity you have to understand how deep these criminals are really into our system. And what you really need to do is understand the workings of how they operate, and with that, you're able to actually maybe come up with better results in your own head. Now, I do want to talk about a few things that they do on their side to manipulate and to work through these the questions and that they have. For example, let me go right into an example here. What's been understood for some time, especially since the computer age, is that many of the things that go on in this world, James, you can map them out in what's called game theory. And basically what it does is it uses statistics and standard deviation and mean, median, and mode, so ways of looking at averages of certain outcomes. And what they do is they play games, and they put hundreds and thousands of different scenario informations into supercomputers even, and they come up with how to react to situations when this happens, when that happens, when this happens, when that happens. Now that sounds like it wouldn't have much accuracy or wouldn't be a big help, but in fact it is. Strategies that they put in, as long as they are going into the systems accurately and they are being utilized in a current manner, in fact, do actually help these crooks to move their juggernaut or their huge operation around the world rather quickly. And we've seen these Arab Springs springing up everywhere. They weren't by accident. They were put together by the same crooks that are trying to destroy us. And I also believe that the same stuff that's going on in the European Union with the economic problems are also a part of the game theory that they have actually put into operation. But we can get into talk about all of those things and why we may not have the same effect with these demonstrations as people believe.
Well, if you look at what actually happened in Europe, and the news is really good at doing this, they'll cover this, and then it falls off the earth. Like Fukushima is all done with. There's no radiation coming from there anymore. Well, meanwhile, it's pounding it out like it's never done before, but it's off the record. Now in these Arab Springs and whatnot, and Spain had an uprising, and now, as far as I understand, Spain's under martial law. So that's kind of how's that again? You have the various uprisings not necessarily yielding a better condition, but it seems to almost further what they would like, they being the they in quotes, would like, and in essence, that's what you're saying here.
Well, I am, and the what that they would like is a complete meltdown of an anarchy in many ways, or desperation in the societies that they are wanting to affect, which clearly are Western countries, United States, Canada, and the Western world. They want to implement some very difficult changes for the people to accept. And one of the reasons why Europe right now is being allowed to suffer through Merkozy, which is Sarkozy and Merkel mixed up here, the Sarkozy-Merkel mess, why we're going through that and why Italy is being allowed to go down so bad, and they're not writing off these debts and they're not attacking these problems in an adult fashion. Anybody with economics 101 knows that when you can't service a debt and the money is just coming from printing, it's a no-win situation. It has to be written off. Everyone knows that. So if these people were really interested in saving their system, they would find the weakest amongst them and start getting rid of them. Instead, what they're doing is they're allowing this thing to be dragged out and allowing more and more people to be dragged down. What that's doing, essentially, especially here in Europe, is allowing them to push through measures to bring a federal Europe under a closer control through Brussels and Frankfurt. That is to say, the national governments will lose energy and lose power and lose control over their own public. France will be completely governed from afar. Now, that happened in the United States a long time ago. We were a country where states' rights ruled the roost, and that the federal government had to come to the states with hat in hand and say, well, we'd like to implement this, and the state would say, get out of here, we don't want to. But today it's the opposite. They were able to move the United States over several generations away from local control to national control, and since they control the national government, that's basically the entire country. The Europeans, on the other hand, have national control on individual states. The French control their own budgets, they write their own policies and so forth, and Brussels has to basically ask them to acquiesce to these national policies. The quickest way to get people to move from these individual states to the super state that they all want is to cause very hard conditions upon the public, and then say the solution is to bring us all together in a closer, tight-knit family controlled through a smaller group so we can micromanage this situation better. So the states that really are going to come together first, and I think in Europe, are probably going to be Germany, it's Holland, of course we've got Austria and France and Belgium, of course. And these are the northern European countries, and then we might see one of the Swedish might come in on this one as well, and Denmark. But they're the countries with the most stable financial systems and the most stable populations for work and so forth. But they will put themselves under a single umbrella. That serves them because the ultimate goal down the road, and not far from now, is a single world government governed through special drawing rights, through their own fiat system, but they'll say it's backed by gold that they've confiscated or that they've taken from national governments, and so you wait and see. Things are hotting up right now, but I'm quite sure this is a power grab, and they're allowing the suffering to continue so the power grab can get accepted by the population.
Well, here in America, over the last year, you have both Democrats and Republicans actually going after Social Security and pensions, the government pension funds and so forth, which would have been like a lightning rod in years past. There would have been anybody who would have said that would have been, nobody would have voted for them. But now they're openly, no problem going for it. And of course, you have no choice. You're picking from frick or frack. So it's it would appear that the same kind of scenario is going on here, and then ultimately, I guess, to unite the two halves. Where's like China and Russia and all this stuff, Micronesia and Africa? How do they fit in all of this?
Well, here's the thing about the Chinese and the Russians. Once the Tsar was displaced from his control, and the Jews of New York moved in and took over Russia back in the Russian Revolution, 1917, the country has been run by the Jewish bankers and has never relinquished that control. And then Mao Zedong, of course, if you read a book called The Jews of China, all of his advisors around him were Jewish. And so the Jewish control and the Jewish implementation of Chinese-style central-controlled capitalism, which is what you see right now in China, are still being run and controlled by the Jews. So essentially, they already run those two countries. Everyone seems to think that they are polar opposites to the West. That's not true. They are a false opposition, if you will. And the world is basically unipolar at the moment, and it has been for some time. It is under this. There's only a few countries in the world that are still standing outside of this crime gang. Of course, Iran is one of them. But even within Iran, many of the people that are running that government are suspect, in my view. But that will remain to be seen in the final analysis. Iran is needed as a bad guy for the West to be angry at Islam in general. So, you're not really sure if they're playing a game with the West or it's the anger is real. But they will murder people in any regard in order to get their work done. They've killed 70, 80 million in China during the Great Leap Forward, and this policy was put together by Mao and the Jews that ran China. But they also, under Stalin and the Jewish controllers that were there under him, killed all the Ukrainians and starved them to death, 30 million. So they have no problem with murder and mayhem and true Holocaust, if you will. So we are really, it's the people at the bottom against the crooks right now. And I think, as you said before the interview started, Catherine Austin Fitts said, all of the protestations that are going on across America in hopes of seeking and forcing change are really going to fall on deaf ears. It's a moot point at this point, because these people will not follow the policy choices the people give them anyway. So we are really in a situation where these people have to be displaced. They have to be taken out. They have to be removed from power. They have to be hunted down, jailed, and so forth. And that really is our only option at the moment. Other than that, political change will only come on the fringes. It will be glossed over, and it'll be simply not substantial in any way, and nothing will basically change. And this is one of the reasons why, I go to websites like Michael Rivero's What Really Happened, and he's championing this Occupy stuff everywhere. But he was also a big Obama supporter. I mean, and I've often been suspect about his intentions. And, he's given people a false hope. Like this guy, Ron Paul. He's a foil. He's in there to be a kind of a false opposition. If he was really standing in the way of this world government's push, he'd be taken out in an instant. He's not. He's there to kind of help them find out who's in the opposition, get names, addresses, people, finding out. I mean, this is a process for them. Taking over countries and enslaving the populace requires enormous amounts of effort and intelligence. Well, Ron Paul, in my view, is a perfect man to bring all these people out of their easy chairs and out into the open to be listed, to be put down. Now
let me stop in there. Is that something that he is consciously doing, or is he doing what he believes and the system is using that to flush people out?
Well, if he's a student of history, he has to know that if he's pissing off these crooks, they'll murder him. They've killed 6 of our presidents totally. Mm-hmm. I mean, so why wouldn't they just, if this guy was really the thorn in the side that everybody is making him out to be, he'd be killed.
Well, I just think that he my assessment of it is that I don't think he's marginalized at this point. And if he got more important, if he came close to winning the nomination or something, then you'd probably see him pulled. But let me go back to Ron Paul for a minute. I've been pretty much behind him, and I've been excited about him and this and that and the other thing. And then he put out his budget, and I got my first hint of wavering, because he was big end of Fed. And then when he put his budget out, he said, well, let's not end the Fed. Let's just audit them really deep. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a big difference. Yeah. And that was the first time even all last year, all last time he ran, all the way up to now, for me, that was the first red flag that came up, and I was like...
Well, there were other red flags long before that. One of them was he was asked point blank what he thought about people who questioned 9/11 as an inside job, which it really wasn't. It was an outside job by Zionists. But when asked if it was an inside job, he said people who believe that are bizarre. And...
I'm not defending the man, but I understand certain people can't have it all together, and they can still be good intention, they can still be honest, and not have it all the ducks in a row. With that, they might go along with certain things and not really look into it, and so that didn't bother me as much as this particular thing, because this is a reversal.
I got to be honest with you. 9/11 was a mass murder, and for anybody.
I agree.
Anybody to downplay a mass murder and blame it on a religion that had nothing to do with it. See, here's the problem with 9/11 and the people who know the truth but refuse to accept it publicly. They are, by their silence, saying that a whole group of people who follow Islam are behind it. And that in itself is a hypocrisy that is resulting in mass murder.
I agree.
And so he is part of the problem, not the solution.
Right. And I look out and I see nobody out there that is the all solution. In fact, by design, if anybody was, if we even knew about them before they were killed, they would be killed. So the real solution has to be in a grassroots. Everyone is on the page or similar, very close on the page, without leaders, because there's nobody to pop. Then there's no one like the.
That is the hope. Now, Alan Sabrowski in some private conversations I've had, and here's the other thing. A lot of people say I'm against Jews. I don't care if somebody's Jewish if they're not part of the crime gang, if they're not out trying to subvert and criminalize participating people like myself, like you, like others, then I don't care what religion they are or whatever they feel. He's from Jewish roots. But Alan Sabrowski said it quite clearly. He said the whole goal has to be information. And if we can infiltrate the minds of the masses, at least to a point where they believe in their hearts that the Israelis did 9/11 and that the Jews control our banking and media, he said we will take them out in a New York second. We will rise up and take them out. But we need a mass consciousness, and that mass consciousness needs about 6 or 8% of the population. And right now we're nowhere near. There may be places in the world that have exceeded 6 or 8% of the public knowing Israel and its friends in America were behind 9/11, or that all of the central bankers and central banks and all the largest banks in the world are Jewish controlled. But the United States and Europe don't know this in the 5 or 8% that we might need. And then we need those 5 or 8% of the people to be mad enough, angry enough to take action. And with the mind control that's gone on in our modern societies and all the television pollution in the minds of people, it's going to be a tough sell. I don't know whether we will finally get away from these people or not, whether they'll be successful or not, although I do know the battle rages. People like myself, I've really resigned myself to the fact that I have to just keep putting it out there, answering the questions, doing the interviews, explaining the research, to asking people politely and kindly to examine it on their own and see if we can reach that 5 to 8% that we need to turn this around. It's still not sure, although a lot of people that I've followed over the years are hopeful. I'm not convinced.
No, what I did on the air the other day was I said, this is probably a couple weeks ago, I said that the problem with planning on a plan is that people are making plans that they think will work. And I said, you have the entire world is controlled by these groups, these people. They have all the power. They have how many technology that we don't even know exists. They have the money. They have the whole setup. So I says, I can't imagine how anybody can really think that they could win with all of this stuff stacked against them. I said, but I think what we have to do is we have to do the right thing regardless of what it leads to. If we all, and I use examples very lightly of like The Lord of the Rings, the book that is, where at the end they did what they were going to do regardless of what happened, and circumstances worked together unbeknownst to them, probably belonging to a higher intelligence, that synchronicity worked out. And I still don't think we should think that it will work out in that aspect. But we come to this planet, we're all going to die eventually anyway. It seems like this planet is made for someone to make a stand, to decide.
Well, we're born, we live, we die. This is the cycle of life, and what we do in between the birth and death, it is consequential. It does matter, and I have to say, are you listening? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I had a little mic thing here that went out. Go ahead.
Well, if we take right action and just keep our head down and push, on the wheel, our shoulder on the wheel, and keep pushing, ultimately, and I'll give you an example. When I first spoke to you, you were in the early process of coming up to speed on exactly the questions that I had been talking or answering for the last 6, 7, 8 years now. And it seems to me, since you've done some of your own looking into it, since you've listened to the things I've said and then other people's responses, read some of the books and things on the net, you are now becoming aware to the point where your questions aren't whether it's true, but how deep does the rabbit hole go, and how profoundly troubled are human beings. And so, in other words, you're not questioning the truth of it anymore, the veracity of my claim, but rather the nuance of that veracity. And so this is a change for you. This is the process for everyone, James. Once you've found yourself willing to at least look, and you have been internally honest enough to take an honest look at this information, you cannot help but come to the same conclusion I did, because I went through that process when I looked into it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, come on, how could that be? It's impossible. First, I would have heard about it. I would know about it, blah, blah, blah. I went through that whole thing. And when I finally came down to the reality that what I had learned about and what I was learning about was real, and that the trouble that humanity was in was dire, and that this condition was not going to be eradicated easily, I then had a choice. I could dig a hole, stick my head in it, or I could fight. A lot of people will choose to stick their head in the hole, but many others will, including yourself and myself, will decide fighting is my choice because that's in my character. And if it turns out to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, and we can get up to a certain percentage of the population, we do have a chance. I'm not saying that we can't defeat these people. Luck can fall on our side. I mean, these people don't have a monopoly on knowing outcomes. As I talked about, game theory, they're playing games with computers, but, this is the real world for me. And how this thing shakes out in the final analysis is certainly not set in stone. And I believe, honestly, or I would have given up, that we can beat them. It's going to be tough. How it'll be done is still unsure. But certainly, running around the streets of major cities, giving yourself up to listing, this is the big thing. There are people out there taking photographs of you, watching you on these social networks to find out who you are. They're finding out your name, address, all this stuff. They're gathering as much intelligence on you as they can possibly get in advance of what they're going to do next. And certainly, they don't need to do that for me. My head's been above the parapet for years. But there are a lot of people out there that they need to get on their lists, and they need to find out who the heck they're going to be going after when martial law is finally declared. Because once these things go south in the real way, these people's murderous tendencies come to the fore.
No, I'm agreeing with you. The problem I'm having, though, is that I cannot, I'm, of course, thank God, I'm not the know-all, end-all, but I cannot come up with any scenario that I could not put down if I was in their shoes. I don't even know all they know. I don't even have all the resources that they have, and I can put down any scenario. For example, if things did get out of hand and enough people started waking up, it's going into wintertime. All they have to do is pull the power out in the northern area, and you would have genocide, mass genocide, because I can't even remember, 99.99% of the people are not prepared to keep themselves warm other than turning on electricity or gas. So if it came down to it, if they have the ability to turn off the grids or something, now maybe I'm assuming too much, but they could come up with excuses and say the sun had a solar flare and knocked out the grid. They've already disseminated that possibility via NASA. This is the stuff I'm thinking about. And no matter what I come up with, they can come up with something to kowtow us.
Well, we're talking 310 million people in the United States, and in the Northeast, probably 80 million in the entire northeastern area, including New York and Pennsylvania. And here's the thing that you go wrong with that. You might lose 40% of the people to internal strife. But what you're going to come out with on the other side is a battle-hardened group of people that just won't put up with crap. They'll be baited for bear. There's enough weapons in private hands in America, including things like 50 caliber guns that are in private hands. Don't underestimate the ingenuity of human beings to kick somebody's fanny when they really want to. Once revolution starts, once a mayhem erupts, of course, that's Rothschild says when there's blood in the streets, that's when you invest. That's when he steals his most. But the fact of the matter is, once things get out of control, there is no way anyone can know the outcome. Mm-hmm. No one can really know for sure. Now, right now, Americans are by and large just a bunch of dumbed-down couch potatoes. But give them 18 months to 24 months of living rough, and watching gun battles in their neighborhoods, or having to cook the neighborhood dog to eat or something. You watch their attitudes change.
Yeah, well, it's a sobering yet encouraging thought that the percentages that would survive would be worth many times what they were prior to. That's
right.
And history does show that in some of the World War II and other things where you took people who, granted, were being used as pawns, but nonetheless they rose to the occasion and were very valor on the field and so forth.
Well, this cabal of criminal Zionists, they were not called Zionists throughout their history, but they are presently called Zionists, so I'll use that moniker, have been kicked out of 105 countries or city-states in their existence. So they have been caught out. They have been defeated. They have been thrown out of nations and nation-states and city-states across the Western world and the world in general. So they can be defeated. They have been defeated. They will be defeated again. Even Rome fell. Even American Empire is dead. All things come to pass. All things change. However, in our lifetimes, the battle lines and the depth of the battles are going to get deeper and more dire for many. And I don't see an easy go of it. The financial system is being gamed as we speak. I told you what they're gaming here in Europe. America will be next. And we are going around the drain right now. We're circling the drain as a modern society, and we're heading toward a dark age, if you will. Now, let me tell you something. When Rome fell prior in earlier history, and things fell out of the control of centralized Rome, the Zionists, who were called just Jews at the time, money changers, did quite well in the Dark Ages, and they found themselves in power, situations, and made a lot of money, and they continued their crime wave. But we went from a world where the Romans had heated rooms, heated houses that were heated from underneath their floors. They had hot baths. They had water ducts, aqueducts, water systems, roadways that were paved. everything. And the Dark Ages descended, and 600 years of lawlessness and civil strife and small country fighting and erupted, and we went backwards in development, desperately backwards, to where people were subsistence dirt farmers again, and there was no infrastructure to speak of for many, many centuries, and that could happen again.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's, I mean, well,
okay, you said it, James. Unplug everybody from the electric grid, and watch everybody. No more TV, no more cell phone, no more iPad, no more anything that people are used to. And you watch us. Who's going to be the one-eyed king? It's going to be the guy with a small patch of food that he can defend. It's going to be the guy that has an insulated house that he can keep warm and defend. It's going to be it's going to be the warlord who can hold sway over a region or area. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are going to take place because society and societal control is going to break down in the ultimate end of this. America cannot stay together as a single nation under these fracturing conditions. It just won't, and it can't. Now, how that will play out is anybody's guess, but certainly we are in for the next 10 years, there's going to be changes that are going to gobsmack and awe people around the world.
Yes, it looks. That's why this winter, I'm being very vigilant in putting together survival for the winter. Now, I am alone in all of my family and friends doing this, but I'm saying, like, okay, so if everything works out okay, what do you lose if you store food, if you have some power backup and whatnot? I mean, how do you lose? I mean, if you have a bad weather, a bad weekend, if you're off work for something, you have backup. I mean, it's not like you're buying some silliness thing that you're afraid of. This is we all should be doing this anyway. You go back a generation, you had people with the gardens, the canning food, but all those people have passed on now. And everyone's used to going to the store and buying what's on the store, but there's like 1 or 2 days worth of food in the store.
That's right, yeah. And people don't have the savoir-faire to, I'll give you a good example here. I've got a car out here. It's Ford, and if that Ford breaks, I lift the hood up. I wouldn't know from left to right what to do under that thing if I don't have the computer analyzer and the plug to go in it and all that stuff. There's zero chance I'm going to be able to fix this automobile. Back when I was a kid, you could lift the hood and pull off the air cleaner and mess with the carburetors and check the spark and go to the distributor, and all that stuff you could do right in your garage with a screwdriver and a set of wrenches. Well, those days are gone, so your transportation is gone if your car breaks down. Everything that you thought you knew how to do or you think that you will be able to do on your own automatically comes into as suspect, because I can't fix my own car. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to have to walk, or I'm going to have to get a horse, or I'm going to have to steal someone else's car. Those are my three choices. Or not go at all, fourth choice. So here we are in this modern world faced with choices that our grandparents didn't even have to face. And again, as you said, most people don't know how to garden. I learned how to garden here. I was not savvy as far as how to fertilize and to till and to plant and how wide and how, what goes in what row and where and all this. And my yields and my harvests were not very good in the beginning. And now 5 years on, with a lot of reading and a lot of effort and a lot of trial and error and a lot of, years experience now, we're getting decent harvests and we're getting good food production and then you have to learn how to do canning. There's bell jars that of past days. I've got over 150 bell jars in my house of 1 quart size, and we put things in them, and I eat off of that food for about 8 or 9 months of the year.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that's been lost. And so one of the problems is people who even know how to do this could get overrun by the mob, and then it's lost again, because the one person that you should have teamed with or somehow worked with, now you've pillaged, and now so there goes their information. It's further drawn down. So that's why I was saying when I walk through all of these things, it doesn't look good. But you bring up a point about the people who do make through. But let me ask. By the way, for those who are just tuning in, we're listening to Daryl Bradford Smith website IamTheWitness.com. I'm wondering, in a spiritual sense, that is it worth becoming an animal to survive in a spiritual sense? Is survival really the goal? Is it living with a particular code of ethics really the goal? And if it means dying with those ethics, is that really a bad thing?
Well, it depends. If you abandon your humanity in order to survive, whether you can come back from that. Well, that's a question for theologians since human beings have been writing down their experiences. Of course, ultimately, when you look behind you and you see your wife and your child and your grandchild or others, there is an automatic urge to put them first and above all others. And when you turn back to the mob, you start pointing your rifle at the guys coming at you.
Well, yeah, I can understand defending oneself. For example, what if it comes down to cannibalism, or like you said, eating the neighborhood dog? Even at some point, isn't there a non-human component in survival that isn't worth going to? Almost not to say it's bad, because it's not a choice in a way. You're being driven there. But we're talking about these psychopaths running the planet, and what they'll just kill people and rape them and all this stuff like that.
Yeah, well.
When do we become in that area to survive? I mean, it's obviously different.
What I've learned is that if the society is unwilling to go full tilt and do all the things that it needs to do to survive and then to defeat an enemy, the viciousness of the enemy will end up defeating them. And so you've got, in the ultimate, you have to be as willing and as ruthless as your enemy in many cases, or you will be defeated. Turning the other cheek when somebody's got a gun to your head, you don't get another turn. You get one shot.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is I for one, and others maybe, are operating from a point that the most important part of being alive on this earth is to follow these code of ethics, to not become an enemy in order to survive. In other words, life is not the ultimate goal. Survival is not the ultimate goal. It's not becoming an animal or evil is the ultimate goal. And if that means dying, even tragically or terribly, that would be a higher energetic spiritual goal than being able to outkill your killer.
Well, see, but that's a decision each person or each individual will make. Now, me personally, that instinct to want to survive, I think, is paramount in me. Although, would I shoot a child in order to survive, or would I protect that child rather than survive? These are questions that I would have to answer at the moment. Here's one of the problems. Here's one of the things that happens to people, and this is really a psychosocial event in people's minds. Is that we would say, all right, let's say things go bad now, and 6 months from now, you've gone from eating a steak dinner with potatoes down to eating bugs on the street. Now, if somebody asked you, would you ever eat a bug, you'd say no. Well, there you are 6 months later eating the bug. Mm. Well, when you're eating bugs, if somebody said, well, would you eat, the neighborhood dog? And you'd say, well, I'll eat a bug here and there, but I won't eat a dog. And then 6 months later you're eating a dog. Then somebody says, well, would you eat the fat lady down the street and put her on a spit and, roast her up and eat her? And of course you'd say no, but some people would end up 6 months later roasting that fat woman on a spit. And there is a progression of willingness. It happens in people's lives. It happens with drug addiction, for example. If, I would never use cocaine because I'm just a pot smoker. Well, I would never use heroin because I'm just a cocaine sniffer. Well, I would never, you understand, and there's a movement down that slippery slope that happens. Now, in the meantime, what you're doing is you're moralizing and you're rationalizing your behavior along the way. And you're always doing it in light of your own personal needs at that moment. And of course, if you see yourself 6 months or 8 months or 6 years after your first declaration of "I would never," you wouldn't even recognize yourself.
Right.
You know, nobody who's ever become a crack whore on the streets of Chicago would ever become one if they said, well, that's where you'll end up. And of course somebody said, well, I would never sell myself for drugs, or I would never pull an armed robbery for drugs, or I would never, you understand? And all of a sudden they do. Well, I would never do this to eat, and I would never do this to protect my family, and I would never do this to, well, you don't know until the time comes, and you don't know how you got to that place in time. I really can't answer that for anyone else except to say that things do happen over time and people do change over time and willingness change. We are going to face hardship. Now, the level of it and the desperation of it and the color of it in general is something that I can't really foretell with accuracy. However, I can tell you that suffering is going to be a given for many. It already has become for many. It already is for many. You know, if you've lost your house and you're bunking in with your mom and your dad right now after being, having your family, and all of a sudden your mom and dad don't get their pension anymore, and there's no more food in the house, and these kinds of things are taking place right now in people's lives.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying though is that in the calmness or semi-calmness of where we are now, it would be great to set up a code of action and ethics, so that when the time comes, you're not forced down the slippery slope. You know what to do and where your limits are, and you accept that life is not above the ethics that we have. I mean, it's easy. Somebody, it's easy for you to say sitting there, and I understand that. But I think it's very important we get that in order now, because when we go down that slope, we want to stop at a point, and if it means dying along that point, well, then so be it. Because I, for one, believe that this is not the only existence, and that what we do in this existence will in some way affect our next existence.
Well, you don't have any proof of that, and
no, I don't.
If you did, you'd be more famous than you are, James. but at the same time, so you have what's called, and human beings are faith based. Okay, we put faith in our relationships, in our relationship to the powers that surround us, and of course, once your faith has been shaken, your faith in the United States government has been shaken now to its roots. Your faith possibly in the path of societal change has been shaken. One at a time, all of the tenets of your faith are beginning to be shaken, and what's left, what you're going to be left with ultimately, is your faith in that unseen power, the one that you believe is capable of interceding on your behalf, either in another life or in this life. And if at some point that faith gets shaken by events, goodness only knows what will happen next. So yes, we are facing those kinds of questions, and for many people, look, they're already starting to face them in Tampa, Florida, and in Las Vegas, Nevada, and in parts of Moreno Valley, California, and they've lost homes, they're homeless, they're living in boxes, they're living in drain sewers, they can't feed themselves, they're stealing to get by. These kinds of things, that their moral turpitude is already tested in so many ways, and their willingness to do whatever it takes is inching its way toward the more violent, and you can see now people are arming themselves to the teeth in anticipation of this becoming ubiquitous, as I expect it will be.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean I agree. That's why I'm just saying this, that by setting your guidelines now. Now, I mean, I would like to see people, for example, who are preparing for these things and be able to help others to get through it. That would be a positive growth through the hard times, rather than simply dog eat dog. It's person help person, and it
well,
can
there
build
will
up.
be. I don't doubt for a moment that will be a very large part of this. I mean, certainly my wife and I are already thinking those terms of helping others and stuff. I mean, if there's more in my larder here than I need to eat, and there's people that are hungry, I am going to provide it to them. I would not watch and allow people to starve around me, especially people I've come to know and care about. That just wouldn't be it's not in my character to do that. However, and how many people will be able to do that with you, and what the percentages will be, we'll have to see. Certainly places that are self-sufficient for food, such as the Midwest or the farming belt regions or these areas, you may see more of that than you see in the big cities. The heartlessness of New York City when there's no food around, you may not see people reaching down the ladder to pick somebody else up.
No, I would imagine these cities, for a high percentage of the cities, would be in trouble. Either you'd have people taking over and confiscating, and then a power grab, and simply just people dying. But before, I'm looking at the clock. We got a few minutes. We got 10 minutes or so to go. 10 minutes. Let me cycle back to the initial discussion. Is what would you say if you could come up with a list of things for people who really want to change things? And if specific as possible, I'll give you a specific example about what can we do?
Well, as I said earlier on in this conversation, education is the key. There is a need to reach a tipping point in the information war, and we're certainly not there. People have to become aware of who did 9/11. They have to understand clearly that the United States government is not owned and operated by the people it's supposed to serve, but rather by a foreign agents and foreign power. We have to understand that our international status is failing, so people need to start taking the steps to be self-sufficient that we've just discussed. So these kinds of things need to be done immediately, and we have to grow upon that knowledge with amongst each other, sharing the information as best we can through websites or through the education process. I believe more people than we are aware of Israel's activity on 9/11 and the fact that they've been involved through this Jewish mafia in the control of our government, in the control of the European government, whether it be France or Britain or Germany or others, and our banking structure. And I think we just need to continue on, even through these darker days as things are getting more desperate, to make sure we can be self-sufficient and that more and more people know who really did this to us. Because ultimately it's going to come down to a battle for the hearts and minds and numbers. And all of that, what is required in that is that we have the right numbers on our side. Because when it comes time for the police department to turn on the public, if enough of them are aware that Israel did this, and then somebody from the Zionist camp is telling them to go kill people, they are going to be much more likely to say no. Instead, I'm going to turn my gun on you.
Mm-hmm.
And they ask the army to come out against the public, and the public says, hold on a minute, you're the bad guy.
Right.
And this has happened and does happen. And the military in a coup in the right hands could save all of us.
Right, and that's actually history has shown that it's
right.
It's like the military tends to be more grounded in this assessment, and they could just turn around at one point and say no. I mean, there's been people who have fantasized that the military would arrest the president, etc., and charge him and so on. But that has happened all over the world.
It has happened. There are many historical references to that same event in many countries through many generations of time. So yes, we do have that possibility, or basically the people who are supposed to be protecting and serving, like our police departments, instead of acting out against the public. And in fact, there have been some examples of this in this Occupy thing. The police were told to go out against the public, and The police said, well, we're not going to. Others have resigned. Other military, the Marines got involved in a couple of instances saying that we're joining this group and we're going to march with them. And so, that kind of thing can take place, and it is taking place on some, limited levels. But the education of who did it to us, so that we can turn our anger and our ire to the real culprits, is also very important. And then the third pillar, or the third leg of the chair, is to become as self-sufficient as possible and get as many people around you to be self-sufficient as you can. Now, I don't think it's a hard sell anymore to say to somebody, even if you don't talk about Zionism, that you need to have a reserve of food. I think people are becoming aware that that's a necessity today. I don't think you're going to have a tough time to sell that to 7 to 10% of the population. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts that people are already quietly amassing food stores in their basements or in their cupboards or whatever, unbeknownst to people. So I believe that's already taken place, but it has to be on a larger scale. And don't forget the most important precious metal. You have to have it. It's called lead. And you have to...
I never heard that one. That's a good one.
It is. I mean, everybody thinks it's gold. They're wrong. It's lead. Lead is the most important precious metal. And you've got to make sure that you have your proper supply of that precious metal. And I would even say to have some silver on the side. Gold is for the crooks to amass, I think, because who's going to be out there to give you 2, 3, 5,000 an ounce for the gold you've got? Nobody.
Right.
But if you come up with a half an ounce of silver and say, look, I'd like to buy some provisions, I think somebody will do a deal with you. So having that and take your money out of the banks immediately. If you are listening to this broadcast and you've been on the fence and you've started to come up, wake up to these facts, get your money out of Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Citibank or or wherever the banking that you've been involved in. Get out and put your money in a credit union temporarily and convert as much of it as possible to silver and lead and food stores. And start informing people of the dire nature of what's coming.
Yeah, I was amazed that it was even covered, but on November the 5th, there was a movement to pull money out of banks, and there were thousands of people did it, and it actually got on the news, and I was surprised they even reported it, because oftentimes they won't report things like that because other people might go, hey, why are they doing that, and look into it, but they actually, at least locally here, they reported it, many did that. I did it a few years ago. Actually, it was Catherine Fitch, who was talking about the shadow banking and all this stuff, and mentioned that Chase, which I was at, was one of the worst. And so I went and did this, go to the credit union. And I tell you, when I was in there, they asked why. I says, do you really want to know why? Or is this something you want to, And the guy said, yeah, I'd like to know why. So I told him. And he was very interested, took some notes down. He was really kind of, you could see in his face, he was kind of really in shock. The lady who was running the place, I think she would have killed me if she could have. The look, it reminded me of that movie They Live, where the guy walks into the banks. I mean, she turned into a lizard in front of my eyes. I think she would have killed me if she could have.
Yeah. Well, Carpenter was way ahead of his time on that movie, and I mean, Rowdy Piper kept telling that guy, put the glasses on. And he, like so many, this man was really the poster child for the American public. He knew when he put the glasses on, he would have to face the music, and he just did not want to hear the truth, didn't want to face it. But ultimately, he was forced to face it, and that's where many people are going to be quite soon. They're going to be forced by circumstance to face the music. The sooner, the better for them, because then they can start taking proactive decisions to make sure that they're okay and their families are okay. And then, there are needs the government has within the military structure to keep those people out of the loop. But if your family, let's say your family, you've got your son's in the military, and mom and dad wake up, they're going to tell their kid what's going on, and that kid's not going to turn his gun on the public. This is the kind of thing that we can hope for, that we can work for. Certainly trying to get a change by asking our government to do it is not going to work.
No, but one thing that could happen from these movements is people could see how the government reacts and go, wait a minute, they weren't really doing anything, or like there's the video about that one Marine who was just standing there with a sign, and he ended up getting his face blown by a flash pot that the police threw. And even worse, when people went to try to help him, I saw this video myself where the cop actually threw one of these flash grenades into the crowd helping the guy who was down, which is completely against the rules. And this type of stuff that gets pushed around, people, they can only push this off so far before something gets to them.
Yeah, and the other thing I would do is I would find out the people who are on board with the criminals and make it known to everybody.
Well, see, we had an event happen that gave me hope in this neighborhood. One of the people who lived in here turns out to be a sexual predator, and he's registered. Yep. And the people shared that information, and they formed together. All the parents the next day were standing with their kids at the bus stop, and they were just standing there. And he came out and he just stared at them. He went back into his house. I mean, there was this solidarity of like, we're not going to let this happen. Not we're going to burn his house down or nothing. It's just like, no, it's not going to happen. We're watching you. We know you. We know what's going on. And there's this shunning, and his girlfriend, who was trying to explain it away and all that, she was shunned as well. And I think that's the great way to do this, is to call them out, and say this is the deal, and to not tolerate it. Like this Penn State.
However, James, I know a guy growing up that was arrested for urinating in public when he had been drinking, and that he was put on the sexual predator list and had to register because he had a morals charge against him in Massachusetts. And that's a true story, and this guy had to register because he was arrested for, they said he exposed himself in public. Basically what he did is peed against a building. So, yeah.
Well, this guy has 3 convictions of
once you look into it, that's something different.
That's what I mean,
What's happened with our legal system is another travesty that we could just talk about for hours. And I mean, it's unbelievable, but I mean, when we take a look at what's going on at places like Penn State, and this is Franklin cover-up too, and John DeCamp, go to IamTheWitness.com if you're interested in finding out about it. I've interviewed John DeCamp 5 or 6 times. He'll tell you about it, because when the man wrote the book, he actually accused Warren Buffett in the book of being a sexual predator and a pedophile. And Warren Buffett said, I'm going to sue you. And he said, go ahead and sue me. He said, the truth is a defense. And he says, I will go to court with you anytime you want. And Warren Buffett backed off the lawsuit. And it's still in that book to this day that says Warren Buffett is a sexual predator from Omaha.
Well, we've come to the time. Time flies when you have good, rich information. So I appreciate you spending time. And, of course, we'll have you back to continue on general and in topics. But I appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, James. As usual, it's always an interesting conversation with you, my friend.
Alrighty, there you go. Well, that was Darrell Branford Smith, IamTheWitness.com.